Well, good morning, everyone. I want to start off with a map of the last 72 hours of total accumulated precipitation and just make a comment on how well the model's been doing as of late. This particular low, this low that's underneath this larger ridge, so we call that a high over low pattern, the model sniffed this out about 11 days ago. And so it's just great to see that there is some decent skill out there in the forecast. Now, I bring that up because in a few moments, we're going to transition to talking about the way this pattern evolves as we move toward Christmas. And a big story is going to be the Pacific jet extension and what that's going to do. And I've got some new kind of information to tell you about that. But I want to bring up something important about this precipitation event. We stressed this yesterday that the amount of rainfall and some of this, of course, mixing into snow here that's falling in parts of the high plains, this is substantial. Some places here picking up a whole month's worth of precipitation and even more than that. And so when you look through there and see a pretty wide area of greater than an inch so far of liquid in this is a substantial amount of moisture. And we still have to watch where this goes and see how it interacts in the southeast. I do want to show you some snow data. This is through midnight. So, of course, more snow has fallen since then. But just in the last 6 hours, parts of Colorado getting down here almost on the corner of the panhandles, showing some decent snowfall amounts. We're picking up 4 or 5 inches of snow. And I looked at the OBS this morning. I love looking at these things, but it just kind of shows we have this pretty strong flow out of the east. The low is somewhere sitting here in New Mexico right now. Very slowly going to move itself to the east. But for those of you that are getting rain, it's like 35 in rain. That's a brutally cold and wet morning here. But we do see some of the snow that's up here in kind of the very northwestern part of Texas getting into New Mexico and then farther north of there. But this is what's really preventing it from moving any farther east. Now, I told you it's cut off, but what helps slow the forward progress is there's just a dominant area of high pressure that's currently sitting right over southern Illinois. And looking at the flow here is kind of neat. This is what helped clear out the skies last night. There was a lot of folks in here that got to see the meteor showers last night, which were quite impressive. I got to watch them on my way home from Chicago late. But this is the flow that's coming in that's going to continue to produce more precipitation in this area. So what I want to do is I want to show you the evolution of that trough in the models, and I want you to see what's happening across Alaska. I want you to see what's happening across the West Coast, and we're going to see how this all evolves for the rest of the country. So this is the cutoff low that I'm talking about, this guy right here. And as we play this forward, we're going to watch, by the time we get into Friday and Saturday, that low, that trough has only moved itself from New Mexico to kind of eastern Oklahoma. I mean, that's it. Now, there's a couple of very subtle features in the GFS. There's one here, and one here. And then in the European model, I'll circle them as well. 1, 2, and then a more open wave down here. So already, just in the next 54 hours, there's a difference. And there's another piece to this flow we're watching as well. Keep an eye on the backside of the trough that's up here moving across Canada. And you're going to see differences in the deeper trough that's off the coast as well. So as we play forward from hour 54, this would be through Saturday, getting into early Sunday morning. Notice how much deeper the low is in the GFS versus the European. So there's a kicker system on the backside. We want this to stay on the backside of the broader trough for one reason. If it does, it'll enhance it. It'll lift it forward, lift the main trough out, and it'll come into the backside with good spin. And that will deepen the low, and it gives it a better chance at producing a bigger system, right? But the European model has a second piece to this that I told you to watch that was way over here. It's now moved itself right into the northern plains of the United States in the upper Midwest. We're going to see what this does in terms of precip, but as it sweeps across the Great Lakes, it kind of deepens and combines with that low, meaning that this is going to, again, because it's coming in on the back side, it's kind of like the effect is that you drop a trough in like this that helps enhance the one out ahead of it to come flinging around like that. Now, in the GFS, that trough is here, and the main trough is out ahead. So you see how they're not as well coupled. So we're going to see major differences because of this, both in the timing, the intensity, and kind of the placement of the precipitation just by next Monday. I mean, this is just a few days away, less than 5 days away here that we're talking about. So then we play that forward and see that low deepens over New England. We'll take a look at the snowfall amounts soon, and we'll try to understand what that's going to do as it kind of exits here through the Canadian Maritimes. Now, while all of that was happening, we were still watching this low off the west coast. And if I just take you back quickly here, you can see already watch this guy over here, already some differences between the models in the depth of that low. And you can also see when it gets closest to the west coast. For example, the GFS by next Wednesday has got this thing very close to Northern California. The European is way back here. The differences are really quite amazing, and that's going to really influence the precip across the west. One thing that is persistent in both models is just the low pressure, low heights, cold air, deep troughs that are around Alaska. And that Alaskan trough, I just keep using this phrase, but that's the way I feel about it. It's kind of ruining the pattern. I think it's going to really influence the jet extension we've been talking about now for a few days. So with that as a backdrop, can I walk you through some of the things that are happening right now? Through 6 o'clock this morning, or 6:05, this is where we still had winter storm warnings, winter weather advisories surrounding this, and we had the really dense fog in parts of the Pacific Northwest. Let's pick it up with the high-res NAM model. Now you're going to notice this system is not going to move very quickly out of the high plains. I've already played you through 6 p.m. tonight. You're going to start to see a frontal boundary emerge. Look at that, right into parts of Oklahoma, but not until 3 a.m. on Friday morning, and then moving its way east very slowly with a little bit of snow mixed in on the backside here as it moves out toward 5 p.m. on Friday evening Central Time. Now, during that time frame, there's a frontal boundary sneaking in. Remember, there's that upper level low that's still sitting here. We could be spreading some very light snow on the northern side of it, but it's so mild it's going to be difficult to kind of get those cold enough temperatures for some snow. And the latest high-res NAM forecast, remember, in the European, is going to take that upper level trough. We usually label them with weird-looking L's like that, and it's going to take the surface low, which is down here, and remember, one's going to get flung up the east coast, the other's going to dive in on the backside. Now, because this trough is a little deeper, there's more snow with it, and now we can start to see some of that trying to get into this area early in the morning on Saturday. We then play it forward, and the high-res models only take us out 60 hours. So in 60 hours, we go from here to there. Sometimes we can have systems that start here and end up all the way, almost in the North Atlantic in the span of 60 hours. But this is cut off, so that's what the problem is. So I thought we would take a look at the snowfall side of this first. I want to give you the whole view here of the U.S. Oh, darn it. This is such a touchy page. This is what I want to look at. Okay, so here's the snow we were just talking about, the chances of 2 inches. But you also notice some here in the upper Midwest. Okay, what about some heavier snows? Here's the chances for 4. So we're still looking at that same spot in New Mexico and southern Colorado. Here's the chance for 8. So really right into this area. Now I want to show you what the models are suggesting. How about the high-res NAM first, since we just watched it? This is what it's got for snow. Again, through the next 60 hours, which takes us out to noon on Saturday. So it's got quite a bit of decent snow for northern Wisconsin and a dusting here, maybe an inch that comes on the backside. And you can see that it tried to toss down some more here in western Kansas and right in the Panhandle as well with the heavy snow here. Now I went from there to the the European model. I'll show you the GFS a little bit later. And what it's got here just through the next 60 hours is it doesn't have the snow in northern Wisconsin. It's got it up here in Minnesota. Still a dusting on the backside, maybe a locally heavier amount in parts of North Dakota. But it wants to spread quite a bit more snow into this part of Texas and Kansas. Some places here picking up 4 to 5 inches of snow. And unfortunately, I don't think we can pin it down. I think it's going to be a situation we watch the system evolve, and we have to see what we get when we get it. So I want you to know what the chances are, but I cannot give you an accurate snowfall forecast right now. All right. So why don't we go from here and look at our 7-day model comparison, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to do 5 different models, all of them giving us a 7-day forecast. Now, most of what you see in California, this is just from that trough I mentioned that's sitting off the west coast. But we have one system here that rolls down, the kicker on the backside, and this moves up the east coast, and the WPC has gotten much wetter in the southeast. Now, if we go from there to the latest European model forecast, let's play this out 1 week. This is a 168-hour forecast from the European. There has been some change. It has brought more moisture into the southeast up to the mid-Atlantic than it had been doing all week. It's got a pretty consistent picture out west, but this has been the most significant change here up the entire east coast. The GFS kind of doing the same thing, but the GFS has always been further inland with its heavier rainfall, as we can now see this back in Alabama. So just to compare, that's the European and that is the GFS. We added 2 new statistical models, of course, lately, and I want to show you them as well. The first is going to be the Fuxi model, and it is also quite wet in that same corridor. But the latest GraphCast, look at this, went much drier into Alabama and over to Georgia. And remember, the GraphCast was wetter in this area. So you ask me again, well, which is probably right? I have no idea, to be honest, because I have to wait to see how these very subtle features, these little waves, interact to produce this. I would just tell folks, if I was in the southeast, to be prepared for locally very, very heavy rainfall. And this system's going to amplify as it goes up the East Coast. And at the same time, that low that's sitting off the West Coast has the potential for dropping quite a bit of moisture into California, especially Northern California. And then after all this is done, we're going to flip all of our attention to Southern California, down into the Southwest, and then kind of yanking out here in the central Southern plains of the United States. All right, so I hate to say it, but it's kind of a morning where I wake up and I say, well, I'm not 100% sure on exactly what you're going to see. But that's why we present all the cases so we can kind of weigh them against one another. So if we go to the comparison between the GFS and the European, let's just play it out. We've already seen through the next 60 hours, and I think the models are handling, while they may not get the precipitation type perfectly right, they're handling the timing pretty well. So let's just pick it up here midday Saturday. And okay, we see one system, second system, but already by midday Saturday, because of the GFS's ability to pull that trough farther inland, it's wetter along the southeast compared to the European. So as we play forward, the biggest change in the European model is this, which is potentially producing some very heavy rainfall over Florida, is now much farther to the north than it had been in earlier forecast runs. The GFS has been pretty consistent with its heaviest precip right in through here. As we play it forward, both systems pull this low, both models pull this low through parts of the Carolinas into the mid-Atlantic, so locally heavy rain there. What are your chances at over an inch? I'll show you that in a second, but it's pretty high. But notice how wet this is on this part, this very tail end of the Ohio River Valley, right on top of the Appalachian Mountains. Some potentially very heavy rainfall in this area. So we then play this forward through Sunday into Monday. And the big questions I'm going to have of the models over the next few days is, what is the real potential for snow on the backside of this? Because as you can see, we're only 120 hours out in the forecast, and there's already a pretty quick conversion over to snow right in through this area, getting all the way down here to like London, Ontario, and then possibly into the far eastern side of the Corn Belt. I'm interested because I'm heading out to Lancaster next week, and I want to know if we're going to get a little bit of white stuff there before I have to arrive. Now, as we play this forward into Tuesday of next week and Wednesday, can you see now the low getting closer to the west coast? And this is where the models, again, just differ on its position. So look, the GFS closer, much wetter. The European farther, drier. So there's still a lot of uncertainty just through the next 7 days in this forecast. I mentioned I wanted to show you the snow. This is the 7-day outlook for total snow from the European. Look at the snow potential here and here. And the GFS, well, let's play it out there and just have a quick look. You don't see the exact same locations with it. So we're going to watch these subtle features just move forward. That's why I almost always just go to the probabilities. I find these maps much more instructive on the chances of being, wet and snowy versus drier. And what we're looking at here is a 10-day outlook on the probability of an inch. So most of this is from our slow-moving low today, but you can see that the European ensemble is wetter into Georgia, through the Carolinas, and up the East Coast. Pretty good probabilities of some heavy precip. And here's the chances of getting at least 2 inches. So there's a better than 50% chance into this area of at least 2 inches of liquid. Same thing for parts of California. Now, it's all going to change in the West very, very soon, and I want to just highlight what I think is going on here. Now, we've already watched this out through the next 7 or 8 days, so I'm just playing the ensemble for you again, and I'm going to take you out there to about day 7 or 8. Let's just park it right here. This is going to be an issue. The continual low pressure, low heights, so troughs over Alaska. And you say, what's the problem? Okay, the problem is while that stays there and the Pacific jet extends, this deeper trough is forcing the Pacific jet farther to the south, way down here. And because of that, it's going to influence how the West Coast receives the rain and how we could potentially get some lee cyclogenesis out of it. Now, what's that? Lee cyclogenesis is how new low-pressure systems form on the leeward side. That would be the eastern side of the Rocky Mountains. Now, cyclogenesis, the formation of a low, the reason why the lee side of the mountains do it is because we get this dynamical stretching as the flow comes off the mountains and then goes back into the plain. So that allows for spin, and that's what creates lows, fresh new lows coming off the mountains. So what do I see? I still see a problem here that I've seen for a while. That. And we could get more action south and more action up the East Coast, but if you're in the center part of North America, northwest flow is no good. And so we see that and compare it to the Pacific jet extension. So as we play this out, you're watching this guy right here. This is through the 18th. Let's play it out there through the solstice. Get you out here a couple of days before Christmas. This would be Christmas morning, Christmas evening, and that jet extension, I mean, I can just show you right now. Here it is, 6,000 miles out. The southern component continues. The split comes up like that. So this is the big question mark. Can we see if this jet extension has the ability to break through the Alaskan trough and get something here? I'm just going to tell you, until the Alaskan trough is gone, there's nothing that's going to change about this pattern. It's just stuck there. I think that Alaskan trough is being influenced by a couple other things. We'll show you that in a second, namely what's going on with El Nino and the MJO. So the week 2 precipitation forecasts all look very similar now. So they've got this corridor of wet that's trying to come in like this. You can see it in all 3 models, pushed farther to the south by that Alaskan trough. And if you're north of it, you're looking relatively dry. And that's why if I come back to this map and flip you back over to who's going to be drier, less than a ½ inch, and I just take this all the way out there to the 29th, there's a huge section of the Canadian Prairie, the northern plains, the Midwest, parts of the interior mountain areas that are not expected to get much precipitation at all out of this pattern. So we take all of that and just think through the week 2, and then remember that the models going into mid-January, so this is December 17 to January 17, that's what they continue to see. Mid-South dryness, wet along the Gulf Coast, wet up the East Coast, wet into California, possibly wetter in the southern plains, but drier north. That's the European extended, and here's the GFS extended. Overall, you look at these and say that there's some good fitment there overall. So the issue here, in my opinion, is that California, while it's expected to get some relief, how much of this makes it into Arizona and New Mexico? My second question is, this has been our major drought area. We've been talking about the Mississippi for months now, and the fact that it's been so very low down here in Memphis. But this is an area that is not translated over wet. And to be honest with you, it's pretty common for this area, especially down here, to be wet when there is a El Nino. We have an El Nino, sorry. But not really playing into the hands of an El Nino this fall. So, bigger issue, soil moisture. This needs to recover, and it needs to recover fast. So we're waiting to see if that's going to happen. I do want to show you one thing, though. This is the week 2 forecast from the CPC. We'll talk about that more in a moment. But I do want to point out that right now, the 21st to the 27th, they've put out the slight to moderate risk of very heavy rainfall, including the coastal parts of Central and Southern California. And looking at the snowfall outlooks, they are projecting some bigger snows in the Sierra Nevada and possibly into the Central Rockies. We'll have to wait to see how the trough ejects into the southern plains to see if this happens. Okay, so I just wanted to make you aware of those 2 maps as well. All right, now let's talk about temperatures, then we'll do South America and wrap this up. Here's today's highs up here, in this part of Minnesota, South Dakota. We are 27 to 30 degrees above average. This is getting into Friday. And Saturday, that warmth just spreads across the northern tier of the United States. And all the way out to Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, it doesn't change. We just have very mild air. If we look at the next 5 days from the GFS ensemble, that's what we've got. Here would be day 5 through 10, and this is day 10 through 15. Now, I just want to let you know something. These are 5-day averages. There will be cold shots that come through this pattern. It's not like it's just 5 days nonstop of warm conditions. It's winter. We have a volatile pattern. To just show you a case in point, this is the high-res European model, and we're just looking at temperatures every 6 hours, so it kind of flows with the day. That's why it warms up and cools off, but just take a look as I speed this up. It looks like next Monday, Tuesday, there's a decent shot at some really cold air. Now, this is while the deep low rolls up the East Coast, but then it's just a quick recovery. See that? It just bounces back up. And the reason we're saying that the longer term is mild, especially for right in the central part of the U.S., is because we don't have a connection to some deep Arctic air. I think Alaska is just ruining it for us. As we play this out there, just take you all the way out to day 10, the cold air that moved out of Russia now into into Eastern Asia, so China moving over toward Japan, it just kind of pulls out into 2 spots as we look out there day 10 through 15. The coldest air is sitting here and here. So whenever you have that, it will be mild on the other 2 sides. It's a very consistent look. So what needs to happen is, can you just imagine rotating this 90 degrees? Build a ridge in there, a ridge in here, and then you drop cold there, and you drop cold here. So it's just this pinwheel of temperatures around the northern hemisphere. Now, that's an overly simplified view of it, but I think we're stuck here for a while, primarily because of this. The MJO's stalling out here in phases 6 and 7. and not showing a strong breakout into phase 8 and 1 is why we're not seeing the Alaskan trough go away. That would help. If you could just get the MJO to move a little farther forward, it would disrupt the Pacific jet stream flow. But as it stands, that's what the MJO forecast looks like right now. It's more about subsidence in this area than it is about rising motion nearly anywhere else. And I was looking, while we do have a halfway decent westerly wind burst, which would suggest that El Nino is still in place, these ocean temperatures have kind of stalled out right now. Now, we expected that. We expect the peak of El Nino to happen right now. But I do expect, even though you've seen a little downward turn in the last couple of days, this is going to bounce back up likely as that westerly wind burst comes in. But I don't think we're going to get much above this 1.5 to 1.6 degree range in the next 3 to 6 weeks before it starts to just really slowly fall off. All of this is also very important to South America, and I'm just going to give you these same maps again. This is your next 15 days from the European. This is your next 15 days from the GFS. The maps have been quite similar. My story has not changed. We have problems with flow. The flow right now is coming in from this direction, and it sweeps along like this. There's frontal boundaries here, so all the action is down in Argentina. We need flow that comes in from this direction in order to fill the monsoon in, and it's not there. Now, I want to also make another point here. Do you remember back a few weeks ago, we said maybe in the last week here, ending up on the 28th, so the 21st to the 28th of December, the models were bringing in rain. That's what they showed back on the 5th of December. This is what they currently show. That's a pretty substantial downward trend. And they keep trying, once we get out here into early January, to bring rains back. What you need to watch for with me is a change from the winds coming from this direction to this direction, and the MJO to finally get out of this phase 5, 6, 7 where it's been and over to phase 8-1. 8-1-2 would be much better. That would take the lid off and allow the moisture to start to return. But until then, I think this is the trend that's been continuing with the models. It's probably going to last for another couple weeks at least in Brazil. And it's getting hot, very hot. I showed you the temperatures yesterday. All right, so these are the newest things I'm watching. We're going to stop this one here, and I'll talk to you again in the morning. Thanks.